Three, two, one. Hi, Luna. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Yarek?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for agreeing to be here. I'm really
And yeah,
excited to talk about your not just about your study, but generally about the topic. We talked a couple of months ago. You were still doing your masters, right?
yes.
Yeah, and how's that been?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor. And it really is an honor, actually, because, it's interesting when you meet people in real life after you've been following them on like YouTube channels for a while. So I do know you have a lot of fans.
Well, if
So
you, I mean, if you define this as real life, because we're kind of still
I
digital,
know it's
yeah. So,
sad.
so that's something we'll be talking about a lot today, I guess. But
Yeah, that's the irony of it.
yeah,
So, yeah, I just finished my master's dissertation. It was titled Digitally Parenting Preteens in the UAE, and it was a cross-cultural qualitative study. And I think it's almost been a month since I submitted. Funnily, though, I submitted at around noon, and then at 5 p.m., I had started my next program, which is a consciously digital coaching program that I'm currently enrolled in.
well, yeah, nice. So yeah, important to get to keep yourself busy, definitely.
Yeah,
So yeah, if you tell me about, I guess before we will talk, there are so many questions I want to ask you. But I guess before we get into that, if you could just tell me, how did you even end up being interested in this and what you're doing now? Because I know I think your path has been, has had a couple of interesting turns. So, and you have your podcast as well. So yeah, if you just tell me about that again, I guess as an introduction to what we'll talk about, because then again, digital parenting, you already kind of mentioned some of these terms, but we'll talk about that as well.
sure. I'll try to keep it short, but in a nutshell, I'm a mother of two preteens, and what I graduated from university in my undergrad had nothing to do with what I do right now. I studied management at McGill University. And I worked in the media and marketing field over the years. Like I've worked in Estee Lauder, I've worked in a media company, managing the Mars accounts, the chocolate company. However, when I had kids, I realized that the corporate world was not for me. And actually, I've always been into learning, reading, teaching. It's been a passion. When my daughter went to school, I decided to become a substitute teacher. And it was through substituting that I started to see this whole new world of conscious, let's say, interactions with children, right? So I'm originally Arab, I'm Palestinian Canadian, grew up in 9 countries. However, I started to see that the way that I was parented wasn't exactly in line with how I would like to parent my kids because the world has changed. We're very global, we're very digital. And while I don't want to put down my culture and my values because I respect those deeply and I still hold on to them, I just felt there was a different way that can be implemented. So I started a podcast with a friend 4 years ago on conscious parenting, not digital, on conscious gentle parenting. And we wanted to basically translate all the knowledge that was out there in terms of books or research that's out on the internet and make it more accessible to the Arab world. So we did it in the Arabic language. We've grown quite fast through only word of mouth. We've never advertised. And currently we have over 1.3 million downloads and we have over 65,000 listens an episode. So it's just been overwhelming and amazing. Now, obviously, because we talk about parenting and things that affect us, and then we try to look for the best solutions on how to deal with our kids. Um, Digital parenting was the biggest mystery box, right? Nobody really knows what they're doing. But over and above that, just child development. So I got interested in psychology. And 2 years ago, I decided to do my master's in psychology to assist me with my podcast so that I can have more information, so that it can help me learn how to read research and perhaps implement it myself. And that took me down the path, I think by sheer coincidence. I think it was the way that our assignments were given to us, because we had a choice. So whether it was social and developmental psychology or any of the other topics we were doing, we were given a choice to pick a topic that interests us. And usually the most salient topics to you are the ones that affect you directly. So I have two preteens. One is, well, one just became a teen. She's 13. And my son is 10 and a half. And it's through living with them and struggling with managing their social technology use, whether it's YouTube, their iPads, their cell phones. Do we give social media? Do we not? So I wrote all my papers over the course of my psychology degree in relation to cyber psychology. And I found out that it truly is a passion and a gap that, we need more people who talk about this to everybody, to disseminate information.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's
that's how I ended
interesting.
up here.
This is very interesting. Well, by the way, I will make sure to link to your podcast that you mentioned. Some of my viewers will be uh, will be familiar with the language. But anyway, it's interesting. Couple of points that I made a note of. So, firstly, it is true, and I often say that you do have to be passionate about your topic. So that's interesting, and in terms of this, let's say, academic side and research
Yeah.
side, I always say that there is no other way. You can't possibly conduct this study and devote your time if if you don't care about the topic. So that's the ideal outcome if you genuinely want to find out the answers to your questions. The second thing is, let me see. Well, this general idea, you mentioned that, and it's funny that you said nobody knows what they are doing. And I can definitely relate, and I find that. And also you said, yeah, nobody knows what they are doing. At the same time, we are doing it, or we are doing something, because we can't pretend that it's not there. Obviously, like you said, there is not a chance that we will be parenting the way we have been parented, just because, as you said, not because of different values or beliefs, or we don't agree with the way we've been raised, not because of that, just because of how fast the technology has been developing. So there is no possible way, simply because nowadays the technology is such a substantial part of our lives, and it wasn't obviously at that time. So that's something that I know lots of people can relate to, and I know that lots of people want to ask questions. So how do we do that? Or you mentioned, I'm in the same situation, more or less. My children are now 15 and 10, and I remember I've been thinking about these things and asking these questions since my older daughter was around 5 or 6. And for example, what I remember is something that kind of stuck in my head, and I still don't know, how true it is, whether it's something that's completely outdated and not true. But I remember I read this article. It was about the limit, how what's the maximum time you should allow your child to. I think it was about watching like cartoons or stuff like that. And I think it said, and it was not a lot. That's that point. I think it said, like, let's say 2 hours, and after 2 hours, there are basically changes in your brain. It's going to affect your brain. It's going to affect you as a person. You're not going to be able to make friends and all kinds of stuff. It was scary. It was scary because I knew at that time that she's definitely beyond that limit, and it's literally something that I've remembered ever since. It just basically doesn't let me sleep at night, because I know,
Yeah.
both of them are way beyond that limit. But now I'm thinking, was it just, a claim that's not even confirmed, by any evidence? I recently compared it to completely different research, of course, but research on cannabis. You have people who will tell you it's generally just a terrible thing, but then you have people that will tell you the opposite. Who do you trust? There are, I guess, arguments for both of these, aspects of this plan. So is it the same with digital parenting? Is it a gray area? Is there any right or wrong? Can we even say whether it's good or bad? What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, so interestingly, the APA recommendation that you referred to about the amount of time kids should spend online, it came out from the APA, and it was sorry, not APA, the Pediatric Association. I forget what it's called. Anyway, so they recommend 2 hours a day, right? That is currently outdated, and it doesn't even apply or work post-COVID and post-pandemic, because we all know that after the pandemic, usage of devices has skyrocketed. The purchasing of devices has skyrocketed even within media saturated homes. So we all have so many devices at home. yet we continue to buy the latest, right? Now, if you think of technology, I mean, a book is technology. And back in the day when books were invented, people freaked out about books, right? And it's the same with anything new. We tend to favor the old and comfortable, and we're always afraid of the new. When I did say before that nobody knows what they're doing, I do want to clarify and say that most parents are trying to do their best. What's interesting is that the research is out there. The research on digital parenting, and like before I go into it, digital parenting, if we want to define it, it's very complex, it's very nuanced, but basically it involves the rules and the strategies that parents put in the house environment for their kids so that they can mediate and monitor and answer questions and teach critical thinking. And there's a lot that parents do. But as with everything, it's on a spectrum, right? And the complexity and the difficulty in digital parenting, in studying it at least, is that it's affected by so many factors, from people's socioeconomic status, their level of education, parents' own digital efficacy, which is a fancy word for saying how good are you at using technology. So this, your culture, your background, all these things affect the way we view technology and the way we want to parent our children when we want to use it. When it comes to the right way, there really isn't one. However, there are studies that tell you that parents who use very restrictive ways of digital parenting, where they'll be like, okay, you're not allowed to do this, you have to show me everything, you're only restricted to 2 hours a day, a lot of things are not allowed, right? So restrictive digital parenting, just like an extension of normal parenting that is very restrictive, tends to backfire because kids are naturally curious and kids are going to want what they can't have. So by restricting things, we're kind of saying, there's something really exciting there and you're not allowed to have it. And so the studies also show that, like I said, it's on a spectrum. However, it's mostly communicating with your children, being very, very open about your worries, your fears, explaining what it is that you're worried about your child seeing. I had seen a very, very interesting post on Instagram or a story. I can't really remember who it was by right now, but they were saying the best way to mitigate harm and risk with your children is to be honest about your fears to them, especially when they're at an age where they understand. Now, I'm not talking about the very young ones. I'm talking about more like preteens or 7+. When you tell them you're worried about certain things, without scaring them, obviously, when you're telling them about your fears, they're more likely to listen because they don't want to be tricked. They don't want to fall into trouble. And it fosters a nice, trusting relationship between the parent and the child, where you invite your child to talk to you no matter what, where you set boundaries and yet you tell them, you know what, you can come to me with anything and I will not get upset. I promise my first reaction is to be calm and protect you. That's my job. So there are a lot of studies that show that enabling parents are pretty much setting up their children for the most success when it comes to digital devices, because it removes the fear factor, because it explains to the child, because it teaches them critical thinking through communication. So yeah, that's a part of it. I forgot the rest of the question. If I'm honest.
Yeah, no, that's all. I'll keep asking similar
Sure.
related questions anyway, because it's all essentially about, again, coming from a parent, is going to be mainly about, what do we do and how do we do. And
Yeah.
it's interesting also that you said about, being this enabling parent, and also about this general approach of being, honest, and you can come to me and we'll talk about it, because I can relate, and I'm sure lots of parents can relate, and except that they can relate and they do that in relation to other things. So, having any other sort of trouble, or even substance use and alcohol and things like that. And I've heard that a lot with this. So, instead of being, hiding it from me, or not coming home, because you're worried, about what you have done, again, come to me and tell me, and we'll talk about it. But then when it comes to technology, it's maybe because it's such a new thing, as you said, our views straight away turn into this weird, outdated model where we're not so understanding anymore. And I was going to ask you, and you said that about being restrictive, and you kind of mentioned about monitoring, I think, or not really monitoring, looking into what they are doing. And this was one of my questions: should we spy essentially on our children, when what they do online? Because on the one hand, I've heard that more than once. I heard that a lot, to be honest. I heard people say every single day you should look into your, literally that's what they said, always check your children's devices, always do it. But then, as I was kind of preparing for this chat, and just out of curiosity, because again I assumed, well, there are different points of view, I started to research this topic, and I found predominantly the opposite, saying no, don't do that. So basically what you're saying, it's more about being honest, more about talking, not looking into what they do. So first question, so how do you feel about that? Is it about, again, you said about different factors, is it about a different age? Because then of course, a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old are completely different. So
Yeah, very different. I think as they grow up, as you're inching towards the 14, 15, 16, you kind of really have to let go then, because they've developed, but you have to think of it like laying the foundation in a building that you're building, right? If your foundations are strong, you can rest assured that the building is going to be okay. I'll tell you what I personally do. And if I had one wish, it was, I don't know, you've obviously heard of Piaget's stages of development, right? How we know exactly what are the different stages of development. My wish is that there would be stages of digital development in children, and that we could educate all parents about what we do know, what science has found, right? So what I know now is that, and I'm just honestly really lucky. I feel very blessed. I was never very open with my own parents. And so as a result, and I'm from the generation where, the internet, I'm a digital immigrant. So I started using the internet 1995, 96, right? We were the first people to use it. But our kids are natives. They're born into it. There's no question about it. It's going to be in their future. We cannot restrict it. We need to teach them and enable them how to use it. Because of the way I was raised, it made me feel like I never ever want my kids to hide anything away from me. And this is why it was my mission to start the podcast, to learn more about me and about parenting and about child development. But I found that a lot of people resonated with the same thing. Now, I'm lucky that the outcome of having worked so hard and so consciously about wanting my kids to come to me with anything and having open dialogue started at a younger age. That's not to say that it's too late if your kids don't talk to you and they don't have conversations. But I think the aim in digital parenting is to have a good, trusting relationship with your child where they're going to want to come and tell you everything that they're doing online. And most of the time, it's going to be extremely boring. It's going to be about the YouTubers they're watching, or they're going to explain to you in painstaking detail every move of every shot that they saw in the basketball video, or even better, the gossip or the things that are happening in school, right? So if you have that kind of relationship with your child, I feel that you absolutely should not be checking their phones, although they should know that you have to have all their passwords. And if you wanted to, you could check their phone. And usually with children who are forthcoming and who have a good relationship with their parents, they're not going to care if you look at their phone or not, right? I feel like wanting to check your kid's phone without their consent, or if it upsets them that you're going to check their phone, it might be a bit of a red flag. If you're coming at it like accusatory, like, I feel like you're hiding something from me. And I think the real thing that parents should be doing right there is not trying to get to the phone and spy, but to figure out, how can I connect with my kid? How can I make better conversations? How can I, and it's a slow process. It will not happen overnight. And I highly recommend that parents work on the relationship way more than needing to spy. Now, am I absolutely saying don't look at your kids' devices? No, I'm not saying that. Every family is different. Every child is different. And every parent knows their child best. And with everything continuum, you've got all sorts of families. You should definitely, though, have the passwords, because if you feel that there's something, you got to follow your gut feeling, and you should probably check the phone, because the last thing you want to do is be in the dark about cyberbullying incidents that are taking place, or, substance abuse or depression or things that are said. You might want to check. But more importantly, the conversation needs to be with the child more than anybody or anything else.
Okay, yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. That's brilliant, and I'm learning new stuff already. So I think I was thinking about what you said, and I just realized, I'm not saying it's still clear to me. I'll ask some more questions, but I realized that perhaps looking into, just like you said about like the intention and the way we do it, if we're looking into these conversations on our phones, and as if we know something's definitely they're hiding something, it must feel so wrong. I mean, it must feel so bad to the child, because I'm sure it affects the perception of trust and all of that, and nobody wants to feel this way, that, oh, they don't trust me. Plus, it's, as you said, as they are growing up, it's basically like eavesdropping. When we were younger, you wouldn't want your parents to listen to your conversations with your friends,
Yeah.
which obviously can be on different topics that not you don't always want your parents to know about, even though they don't have to be criminal and criminal activity, just topics that teens like to discuss, even if it's about boys and girls that they like, anything. It certainly wouldn't feel very well to be in that situation. So, but then on the other hand, and I'm sure it's a problem that many of us, that's probably what causes us all that anxiety and stress, because you don't want to do that. But then, and you mentioned that cyberbullying and all kinds of stuff. I mean, there is so much. I can see someone in the background. There is so much stuff going on. I mean, I watched this Netflix documentary about a guy from Germany who developed this huge international business selling drugs from home, basically sitting in front of a computer. So many things are going on online. So then you don't, and then all kind of content and and porn and dark web in general and stuff they find there. So you don't want your child to go there. But then, are they really not going to go there? So again, I know there is no right or wrong, but have you had any thoughts on that? Is it still about telling them, okay, you will end up seeing weird and and sick stuff online, but and then explain why they don't want to be watching that? Or what do you do? Because again, how I feel it would be naive to assume they will never come across such thing, anything
But they
that's
will.
wrong. Mhm.
They will. They will. The stats now show that the average age at which a young child will encounter pornography, it used to be 11, and now it's as young as 6 and 7. So we do have to have these conversations at a much younger age. What I think about all of this is, once you have these conversations, you kind of have to break it down into bite-sized pieces of information, and the conversation needs to be continuous. You know, they are very difficult conversations, but parents need to start getting comfortable with having them. Because if your kid is not going to hear it from you, they're going to hear it from their friends. And the minute a child hears something from their parents first, you can be assured that they will hear it from their friends. But when they hear it from their friends, they'll be like, oh, that's a thing mom and dad talked to me about, you know? And then you basically gain power in their eyes. Oh, mom knows a lot. Maybe I should ask her more, you know? And I'm talking about the younger ones, right? The more conversations you have, we need to tell them the harms of pornography. We need to tell them about gambling. We need to explain gamification of all kinds of websites and apps, and even the effect of the addictive qualities of games. When you explain to a child what is going on, they're less likely to fall into these traps, because kids don't like to be tricked, particularly teens and preteens. They're very righteous, and they're very like they want to do the right thing. and they hate being manipulated. So if they knew that they were being manipulated, they're going to do everything in their power to not do it, right? Or to not let the person manipulate them. So this is one of those situations where knowledge really is power. They might be very difficult conversations. We might not have the vocabulary or the language to have these conversations because they were simply not conversations that we have had with our parents. You know, like our parents didn't talk to us about this stuff. And that's where the difficulty lies. But I urge every parent to look on the internet. I mean, let's use it for our benefit. There are tons of books out there about how to speak to kids about pornography, about, you know, risks of addiction. About pornography, there's a wonderful book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And the same book with the same title has been done for two age groups, the ones that are very young, like less than 6, and the one that's like 7 to 11. So people are there are resources that exist. There are wonderful accounts on Instagram and Facebook and just online. You just have to do a quick search on digital parenting. How do I help my child? How do I, you know, online safety? The thing though, parents should be aware though that the research has predominantly been skewed. You know, it's split into utopian and dystopian narratives. You've got those that say, oh, there's amazing benefits and people shouldn't be worried and this is the future. And you've got the other side, which is the majority, which is it's all doom and gloom. Our kids are going to be all like, they're all going to suffer from anxiety and depression, and suicide is going up, and, you know, COVID didn't help. And it's very scary and it's very heavy for parents, right? But researchers are seeing that. They're seeing that there's a gap, and they're seeing that things are very reductive when they shouldn't be reductive, because the way that kids are affected by technology comes down to their character, personality, their environment, other issues that are going on in their life. So it's not really black and white. And I see it as today you cannot be a parent without being a digital parent. So if you are a parent and you're wondering if you're doing the right thing for your kids on a day-to-day basis when it comes to how do I wean my child, how do I feed them, what's the best thing to feed them, what's the best thing to clothe them, you know, I raised my kids back in the day. There was like babycenter.com, right, where you would log on and there would be like all this information at my fingertips. Just like we seek information about growth, how we want to raise our kids psychologically, developmentally, today we cannot do that without researching and looking up the best ways to raise our kids digitally. And that means getting down and dirty with the technology that they use. If they're into gaming, go and game with them. If they're, you know, on TikTok or social media or whatever, I used to be one of those parents that said, you know, oh my God, my daughter is never going to have social media until she's 16. Like, no way, right? She just turned 13. I wanted to instill in her that we're not going to lie, right? We don't encourage lying. So if the company and the app says that you should be 13, and by the way, that's like an arbitrary number. It doesn't mean that when they're 13, they're ready to use social media. It absolutely doesn't. This is just because of data protection in the United States, right? However, some parents will lie about their kids' age and give them social media accounts. I wanted to point that value out and be like, we don't lie. When you're 13, I'll give it to you, because I didn't want her to feel like she was the only one. And you know, kids say, I'm the only one. They're not the only ones. But I also wanted her to learn how to use it when she was younger, where I had more control of the narrative that's in her head, where I had more, I don't want to say control. Control is a very wrong word. Where I had more influence, let's say, about, you know, teaching her that we can use this as a tool for great things you could learn. Let's find out what your hobbies are and your interests, and let's develop these. Or it can be a very bad tool that will harm you. But you don't want to just tell them, oh, you know, it could be so bad, it can cause, you know, depression and I don't know what, and leave it there. No, tell them stories. Recently, just yesterday in the news, it was out that there was this poor little girl. She was 14 or 15, and she committed suicide, or and the coroner decided that, you know, it's because of the the videos that she's been served. Like she searched for something, and then all her algorithm was serving her the same stuff, and it caused her to go into that rabbit hole and that spiral. I don't shy away from these stories, and I share them with my kids in an age appropriate way. You know, the more they know, the safer they are, because there's no shielding them anymore. There absolutely isn't. There's no way to protect them. Unfortunately, they have to grow up a bit faster. It's up to you how much you want to disclose. But that's just my philosophy. I really don't think, even as an Arab with, these cultural, I don't want to say restrictions, but like, in our society, we're a collectivist society. We have rules that we live by and stuff. I choose not to parent by these rules because I feel that my kids' safety comes first, and I feel they're safest when they know the most.
Yeah, that's very, very useful and extremely powerful advice. And generally, everything you said is so interesting. I hope that it's not just me who finds this to be very interesting and instructive. And I was going to ask you about where can we learn about this kind of stuff. You already mentioned a book. I hope later I'll probably ask you about some additional resources, and I'll put them into the description to the video, because I think that's very important. We are overwhelmed with it's another one of these topics where on the one hand you don't know what to do, on the other hand you're being overwhelmed with a lot of information. Not necessarily all of it is right. So so that's probably why it's also so difficult to even start thinking about this, because then you kind of try to find out what to do best, and then only to realize you're completely overwhelmed. You don't even know where to start. I think it does come down to what you keep saying, and the whole theme of what you've been saying. This honesty. It sounds like some kind of a cliche, but it is essentially about being honest, about talking. When you said, it's also interesting, you mentioned talking, for example, about the YouTube videos they watch, or the TikTokers. I think that's also important, just from my personal experience, rather than I kind of figured that out on my own, although I'm just guessing it's probably the right thing to do. Sometimes I was tempted to say, I have noticed that they would share, especially the younger one would excitedly share things that she heard from a YouTuber. The temptation is to say, well, it's not that interesting, or it's not true, or don't listen to them. And I kind of sometimes say that, do understand that these are just people like me and you, and sometimes they may be wrong. So that's important. On the other hand, you don't want to just kind of dismiss everything, even if it's boring to you. I kind of just learn.
It's painful sometimes. It's like the painstaking detail, but
exactly.
You have to listen.
Yeah, and that's
if
and
you
that's
want them to keep coming, you gotta listen.
Exactly, and it's kind of what I figure. I'll say, sometimes I'll listen to that and I'll say, oh wow, I didn't know that, for example. So she kind of feels like, she just taught me something, and she learned it, and because I've noticed that
it's empowering.
Yeah, and they do treat it as such. They often, I see it. My younger, especially daughter, she's excited that she learned something. It's not that that's how they learn. And to be honest, I often notice that they do learn interesting stuff. Sometimes I am shocked that they know some things.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, and they learn it from TikTok, which up until recently, I just perceived purely as just source of entertainment, and not a good entertainment at that. So, but now I start to realize that they actually do learn things from it. So it's interesting. It's definitely about also rewiring, our prejudice and our perceptions, because we are getting old. We are, outdated, and we are, in this world, we're trying to catch up, but we don't always succeed. So in terms of learning about this stuff, right? How do we learn? I think you mentioned I forgot again the term, but you mentioned you're training to become
So I'm doing a coaching certification, and it's called Consciously Digital. And it's just about being, like conscious parenting, where you're intentional about the way that you parent your child. You keep your emotions in check. You don't react and get angry. You take a breath. You practice the pause. So just like wanting to live this conscious life of, I do things with intention. Consciously Digital is one of those programs that is training coaches to be able to help people practice digital well-being in their life. So you can adapt it to any target audience that you like. So my aim when I'm done with this is to be able to help families and adolescents with their technology use. Because when I was doing my study, actually, a lot of my participants joined the focus groups because people are just so hungry for information. We socially compare and we want to know what everybody's doing, right? And we kind of don't have these safe spaces where we can compare. So I was hoping that, and within my focus groups, when I was doing the study, they were asking me, what should we do? And I'm like, this needs to be another time. But I'm hoping that by learning some coaching techniques on how to help people or consulting with people, that we can create more resources that help parents. There's no right or wrong answer. Like I said, the answers lie within the families and within the children. My one thing I would say is practice empathy. It is only by being able to be empathetic and removing the whole traditional way of parenting in terms of like, I'm the parent, you're the child, I know more than you. Unfortunately, today the balances have the scale is tipping. It's no longer balanced. In some things, they do know more than us. And so we need to practice empathy. We need to listen a lot. And if they have a real reason why they want a device or a social technology, and let's not jump to say no, let's get curious. So in my very personal instance with my daughter, when she wanted to do TikTok, we actually used TikTok together for an entire year. And we trained the algorithm, and then we gave her that account. There's ways that you can do these things, but we just have to put the effort. We can't just let it be. And in terms of resources, I'll share a bunch with you. You can post them at the end. There are so many. You just have to search for them. But above everything else, above all the research that's out there, parents tend to know their kids best. And so trust yourself as a resource. Yes, refer to the science, refer to the books, refer to the experts. But at the end of the day, if you have a good relationship with your kid, and if you don't have a good relationship on your kid, forget technology. That's what you need to be working on. You need to have a closer relationship with your child if possible, and learn the ways to get them to talk to you, but be empathetic, because life is so hard these days, especially for our young ones, and we need to understand it so that they can learn how to live with it.
That's a great conclusion to this conversation. And again, thank you for being here. To those who are watching, I'll post, as you said, some nice resources, but also I'd encourage you to ask questions, to discuss in the comments, because maybe that can also be one of the resources online. But again, thank you for your time and these
Thank you for
super
having me. I really
powerful
appreciate
tips.
it. Thank you so much for having me.